Thank you all for coming and celebrating with us and with Universal Studios. In the meantime, I would like to add two guests up here to have a brief discussion about the making of Ghost of Mr. Chicken. Please welcome first the daughter of the star, Don Knotts, Karen Knotts. Karen? And also joining us today is the woman who plays the love interest for Don Knotts in The Ghost of Mr. Chicken. She plays Alma May in the film, and her name is Joan Staley. Please welcome Joan. Thank you both for being here. I'm very excited. This is one of my childhood favorites, and I watch it quite frequently. And I grew up in a very small town, so the whole Don Knotts and Ghost of Mr. Chicken lifestyle and humor was very much a part of something that I recognize. So I'm going to start with you, Karen, just because since Don is such a central part of this. I think I'd like to know a little bit more from your perspective as to what your knowledge of this film was, what his career was when this was coming out, and what he was like around home versus what you learned of him when you seen him on television or on the screen. Well, what was that dichotomy like for you?
Well, he was a little nervous about this film. I believe it was the first of the Universal. When he left the Andy Griffith Show, he had a 5-picture deal with Universal Studios to do whatever he pretty much wanted. And this was the first one he was very nervous about how it would be received, and being the star of his own film was an incredible adventure for him. And I remember that the first script they rejected. They weren't very happy with it. And the authors were Everett Fritzl and Jim Greenbaum. Everett Greenbaum and Jim Fritzl. Yeah, those are mixed up. They were two of the writers on the Andy Griffith Show. And so Andy Griffith was called in as a consultant. And he helped them come up with the basic story idea, and then it took off from there.
Terrific. So do you remember, you grew up with him as Dad. Do you remember at what point you kind of discovered that Dad did something that wasn't kind of typical for dads?
Oh, I knew that early on because, in New York, where we grew up, the beginnings of television were in New York City, of course, live television. And my father was on the Steve Allen Tonight Show, which was a huge hit. Everybody watched that show. And he was known for playing the nervous guy in the Man on the Street segment. And so, they would come up and ask him, are you nervous? And he would say, nope. And so that nope became a household word. Well, we did watch the show. My brother wouldn't remember that. He's 3 years younger than me. But that was live television. And so I was used to my father leaving, then we would watch the show. And then later I would see him afterwards or the next day or whatever. And the first time that I ever saw him when they had tape was when we were out here in Glendale and he was playing Barney Fife. I was watching the show and he walked in the door. And I was astonished. I didn't know what to make of that. I just kept staring from him to the TV and back and forth. And he said, "It's okay, honey. It's me. I'm real. You can touch me." I was really scared.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
So what was did you have any sense of how did you become aware that this was something that he pretended, or that he was an actor and that he pretended to do? Was there a separation at all as a kid that, what was he like at home versus what was he?
Well,
did you separate that out?
He was always performing for us kids, acting out silly little bits and things. So I think we had that sense of him being a performer. And plus, when he was on the Steve Allen Show, I was really little, like, I don't know, younger than 5, and I already knew that he was an actor then.
Okay. So, Joan, let's talk about how you first heard about this project. How did you hear about the Ghost of Mr. Chicken, and did you audition, or were you a contract player at the time? What was your status in getting involved with it?
Well, Edward Montaigne, who was the producer, I had worked with him on the series Broadside, which was the female counterpart to McHale's Navy. And I played Honey Hips Love. And, and we had the misfortune of being opposite riflemen. So we were only on one season. But Eddie saw in what I feel was a great gift to me. He saw that I was able to play straight as well as being the comic relief. And I was very honored when he said, "Joan, will you play Alma?" And I said, "Sure. Alma in what?" And he said, "It goes to Mr. Chicken with Don Knotts." "With Don Knotts?" "You bet." So that's how that came down.
So were you working a lot at Universal at the time?
I was under contract
You were
at that time.
under contract at Universal. So what was that like at that time with being under contract and working at Universal and that studio in particular?
It was a little different from the usual stories of the contract guild because originally I was under contract to MGM. And that was toward the death throes of the contract system. You only went under contract to Universal if they had a project for you, or if you wanted to do a series there or a film there, you had to go under contract. And
But
that's-
Universal was pretty heavily into television pretty early. So,
Absolutely.
So would they put you back and forth between television and feature roles?
The television came first. I was working a lot at Universal, and then once the series came, and I was on it, then that's when the contract came. You want the series, you go under contract.
So what memories do you have of the making of this? Was it fun? Was it?
Working with an icon is, I didn't know what to expect. I really didn't. I didn't know if he was going to have arrogance or if he was going to be a dictator on the set, and I found the most incredible performer who was so giving, and he was like an old friend. He made himself available, and he was wonderful to perform opposite.
So he'd won 5 Emmys for playing Barney five years in a row by that point. So he was really well known and popular and
Yes.
and very well liked. What was he? Did he have a lot of control on the set, or was he standing back more as an actor, or was he involved on some of the working out the things with the director, or what was that relationship?
It was already worked out. He was always prepared, and I think, except for the occasional, "Oh, that works. Let's use that." Excuse me, and that we would do. But everything was pretty well worked out in his mind, and we shot it like a television show. So he was familiar with that. I was familiar with that, and there were no long lags. I think we shot it in 7 days. I believe it was 7 days.
7 days for the whole movie?
Yeah.
I heard 17, but I don't know. You would know better than I.
Well, then I have fading memory, so those days went by
Even
fast.
17 days is really fast.
I do know that the big hope for Universal that year was a Cary Grant vehicle called Father Goose, and they poured millions into that. And this piece that we did was $750,000, and it was sort of like, yeah, we'll drop it in, see what happens with it. And it was the total outgrosser. It outgrossed Father Goose with Cary Grant, outgrossed everything for the year for Universal.
So, was there any improvisation on the set, or was it pretty scripted and you know exactly what was going on, or were there times when it was one way or another?
Timings were worked out. Thank you for the correction on the 17 days. It makes the 750,000 even more incredible. Timings would be worked out. We'd run it through, and then we shot it. So there would be bits and pieces that we would contribute. It was like we had been working together for years. And he was such a giving actor that I followed his lead. And I took my timings, and sometimes after rehearsal, he'll go, "Yeah." And that was it. That was the compliment, "Yeah." And so there was not time to work things out back and forth. And Alan Rafkin was directing, and he was a solid television director.
Talk about what that relationship was like working with him.
I had worked with him before in various television shows, and so we were not new to each other. But again, it was laid out. It was all predetermined, the direction that it was going to take. Don would come prepared. He knew the direction of the character that he wanted. So it wasn't a matter of the director had to tell him. They had already worked it out. And Alan just shot it like a TV show. And that's what we did.
So you mentioned that the producer had seen you as somebody who could play straight, but you're also having to play straight with Don Knotts, which I would assume that there were
Right.
times when that was not as easy as it might seem.
Playing, no, it wasn't. Playing straight is always, I think, the more difficult of the comedy. If you have the comedy line, the total pacing, that's the final line. That's where the pacing and the comedy comes in, and you have control. Wouldn't you agree? Mm-hmm. And if you're playing straight, you have the setup. Or if you have the last word, you have to make it sub underneath where you're not capitalizing on the laugh line. And that's difficult to do. I think that's more difficult to do than drama, and it's certainly more difficult with comedy. I think comedy is much more difficult than drama.
So were there times when you had to do multiple takes, or where you were trying really hard not to laugh?
Yeah, on the porch scene, and I must tell you, you're all familiar with the film, the soup scene was so difficult. And especially with the guy who was sitting across, who was a master of mugging. And he was between Don, and I'm trying to look lovingly at Don, and this is no big deal for Alma. This is the way things go, and I've got this consummate nut in front of me, and I'm supposed to ignore him. And I tried not to look down a lot because it was so difficult not to laugh. When you've got two masters going, I was just lovely. I was happy to be in the scene.
So was this shot mostly at the studio, or was there some location work, or was it?
A location on the studio in the back lot.
So it was all
yeah,
shot right here in California. So
on the lot, Universal lot.
Fantastic. So what did you have a favorite scene of yours, or something that you're particularly proud of in this, or something that,
I don't know.
What's
the
it
porch
meant-
scene stands out
Okay.
in my mind because I wanted to be the right character, and he was playing off me as well, but I wanted to be in his timing and not mine. And so I'm proud of that. And also the soup scene, I think it's incredible.
So you told me that you went around to various premieres around the country, like 6 of them or something like that, or?
It was more than that.
More than that?
They had, you used to go on the road to promote films. Usually now the big massive films will have 1 or 2 stars, and they'll go to New York and a couple of other places and appear on late night television. But then, back in the 60s, in the 50s and 60s, you went on tour, and you would make 2 or 3 cities in one day, and that's with a plane flight. And literally, you would say, okay, I have to greet them. What city are we in? Literally, because with 3 cities in one day, and you've got your Ice Folly smile pasted on, and you really want the people to like you, and you really want them to come see the movie, because maybe you'll get another movie out of it, but you don't know where you are. And fortunately, they would have someone from publicity along with you to say, Joan, it's Tuesday, it's Ohio. It's Cleveland. Oh, thank you. And so that's how you promoted a movie. You really got off your duff and went to the and Don was doing the same thing, and Don came down with a very serious illness during that period. We were in New Orleans, and he with the blood clot in the leg.
Oh, okay.
And that's when we were, and I've just gone, I should know that, but when you have a blood clot in your leg, and we were worried about him, and he was saying, it's not a big deal, we'll get through it. And you don't get through that. You have to go home, get in the hospital, But that's the kind of performer he was. Whatever it takes, we do.
That's right.
Am I right?
Oh yeah.
It's not a discussion. It's just, that's what we do.
So
This
Karen,
is what we
you've-
do for a living.
You've created a show where you kind of talk about your father, and
Yes.
tell us a little bit of what that's like, or why you decided to create that.
Well, when my father passed away in 2006, I suddenly realized, oh my gosh, I have all these memories, and people are constantly asking me, what was it like to grow up with Don Knotts? So I thought, hey, this could be a show. So I started working on it, and my father helped me a little bit with some ideas and things. And then the first time I did it was at the Group Repertory Theater, the Lonnie Chapman Theater. Some of you know that theater. And I did it there, and people really encouraged me, so I kept on going with it. And now I've been touring with it around the country, and I have a couple of performances in LA coming up too. If you're interested, you can see my...
Interested.
Okay. Well, I don't have a date at the moment, but you can get on my mailing list. I have these postcards. You can see my friend Kerry Riley. Kerry, give a wave over there. He's got all the postcards. Thank you.
Hey, Karen.
Thanks, Gary. And then you could get on my, you can go to my website and find out some things there and contact me through that. But basically the show is, I cover the whole spectrum of what it was like for him to break into New York in the early days, in the early 50s, and also what his home life was like, his influences, why he started becoming an actor, his background in ventriloquism. And then coming out here, how he met Andy Griffith on Broadway, and their relationship, what that was like, and some really great stories about Andy, and just the whole thing is full of stories about Dad and about me. I kind of have myself in there too. About our relationship, what our father-daughter relationship was like, which was absolutely lovely. So it's a lot of fun. It's a great little comedy, I think, and I'd love you to come see it sometime.
So what was his in later years when Ghost of Mr. Chicken would come up? What did he think of it, or how did this fit into the Knotts pantheon?
I think he was very proud of this film. He was very proud of it, and it's probably the best of the five, the Universal pictures. But I think it's the one where he really literally moved Barney Fife from television into this other character, which still had a lot of the same qualities of Barney Fife, but yet it was a different character. Mm-hmm. And was a successful transformation, and elements of the nervous guy are in there, and in the speeches and everything. Oh, and by the way, you hear that Attaboy Luther? That was the voice of Everett Greenbaum, one of the writers that we mentioned before.
That's in the park sequence.
Yes.
Okay. And do you remember when you first saw this, or what?
Oh yes, I remember. Well, I remember standing in the line. My father hated to stand in line for movies, even his own. And but I remember that he went by himself to a screening when nobody knew he was there. Not a screening, but a regular, theater, and sat in the back just nervously waiting to hear those laughs to see if they were really going to laugh at the stuff he thought they were going to laugh at, and they did. So he came home just overjoyed about that. I remember that.
That's
I know when you transfer from live television, which I also did back in Playhouse 90 days, if any of you remember those, the great difficulty to bring yourself over as in any character from live, which is an immediate, and either that it worked or it didn't work, and then with live television, that it works or it doesn't work, to film where, thank God it was shot like a television show, because you could have a sense of the timing, and it was quick. You didn't wait around, and you didn't get lethargic. You were up, and you had to be with it the entire time, and your energy level was level at the peak. So it's difficult, to make those transferences.
It is.
So Joan, you said that you haven't seen this on a screen since the tour in '66. Is that?
No, I've seen it on tape, but this is exciting for me because for me to see this print on a big screen, I haven't seen it since we were promoting it in '66.
Okay. Well, let's all watch The
It's a
Ghost
long
of
time
Mr.
ago.
Chicken on the big screen, which was